You're listening to Let the Beat Build, a music production podcast where I, your host, Marcelino Villalpando, interviews music producers and have them walk us through their creative process. Today on the show, we have a producer by the name of Gnome Beats. He's going to walk us through his track, Glaciers and Thunder. You can find Gnome Beats performing his music this summer at the Lightning in a Bottle Festival. His music is also part of the Dome of Doom record label. But before we hop into the conversation, let's take a listen to some of his music first. First off, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So for those that don't know who you are, why don't you kind of give us a little backstory, introduce yourself, kind of tell us how you got into making music.
Well, my name's Timo, a.k.a. Gnome Beats, and started making music way back. I was about 9, started with acoustic guitar. I got a 4-track at the same time, so really right away I was into making tapes and making little compositions. As I got older, I learned more about theory and went on to study jazz and went to CalArts to study world music. Really fell in love with electronic music from what I was hearing, mostly late nights on KCRW, and then hip-hop on KPFK, Divine Forces Radio, and fell in love with hip-hop. Moved to San Francisco, dropped out of CalArts to just explore beat music and bass.
Who are some of your production influences?
Early on, Massive Attack was a big one. King Tubby, Timbaland.
Some hard hitters.
Oh yeah.
Is that where you get your bass influence from?
Yeah, well actually the bass influence really came when I was living in San Francisco. It was about 2004, 2005, and Crunk was just hitting the scene hard. I was living next to some nightclubs where I'd hear that stuff careening through the neighborhoods, and artists like Yin Yang Twins, David Banner. That's where I really kind of discovered the power of that low end
of the 808.
The 808, yeah. And I started playing with pitched 808s in my own productions instead of using normal bass synth patches. I'd replace it with 808s and play it out pitched on the keyboard.
Lil Jon's actually an underrated producer, in my opinion.
Well, I feel like people don't even know that he's as big of an influence as he is. Especially, younger cats now don't even know that all their favorite songs wouldn't even exist without Lil Jon setting the stage first.
That is a factual statement. That is not an opinion right there, sir. That is a factual statement. I wholeheartedly agree. I love that album, Crunk Juice.
Yeah.
Such a classic.
Yeah, that was a game changer.
If a track doesn't have 808s now, I don't really mess with it. What was it about pitching the 808s that really struck a chord with you? Because it was still kind of new at that time.
Yeah, it was brand new at the time. Like I think the only song I ever heard it actually happen on was I think a David Banner song at that time. But
you remember which one it was?
The Whisper song was one of those tracks that kind of changed everything for me in terms of how to imagine low end and also simplicity and intimacy in music production. It sneaks up on you. It's intimate.
No, absolutely right. It's actually kind of tribal in a way. Like every time I'm in a club and that song comes on, people, they get in a trance. That bass, it's just so gravitating.
Yeah, there's almost a physics element to it with bass music where these resonances actually change your body's physiology in the moment, and some metaphysical transformation can happen with some of this music, especially when you're in a situation when you're hearing it on a big system and the sound waves are actually literally rearranging the molecules in your body, that type of a thing.
That reminds me of that Jurassic Park scene. You remember that scene when they're in the car, in the water, the cup of water starts vibrating?
Yep.
All they did there was below the cup was they played the lowest chord on the guitar, and that's how they got the circle. Because it's the lowest note, it's the most bass heavy. It totally makes sense to what you're talking about. The molecules just reworking and kind of adapting to that.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to dive into, I want to start talking about Glaciers and Thunder. And it's evident that you're a big bass fan because this track is extremely bass driven. That's actually what attracted me to the track. How did it come about?
Well, the track started as part of a beat cipher. This guy Defy hit me up online.
Real quick, so for those who don't know what a cipher is, what is a beat cipher?
It's where a group of producers get together and all share like a single sample or a single set of rules and then make a beat according to that, and then put it all together in a mix. It's just a fun challenge. And Defy sent the sample of a talking drum, and there was some voices in it too, but I really just singled out the talking drum and used that as my main percussive element in the beat. And then I just built a very simple beat over the top of that. Pounded out the beat just on some pads, both at the same time. Right after the kick and the snare, I took slices out of a performance that I played at some point in my life that was on my hard drive. Just a drum set, rim shot, pitched up. And then the pitched 808s came after that. It just seemed like the right thing to do. That was pretty much it. And that's when I had the basis for the whole track. I just knew I wanted it to be a simple track. Everything else was pretty much just dressing and embellishment after that. I treated the talking drum sample first in this whole process. Got that to where I wanted it before moving on to the bridge. I put it into the sampler so that every key that I go up or down on the keyboard, it either gets higher or lower. As it goes into the next section of the song, I then play the whole thing an octave lower. So it's slowed down a little bit and has the deeper pitch. Right around the time that I made this track, I was producing with my friend. We were writing and producing for this young female singer. So I had these vocal stems on my computer all ready to go.
Watch it melt away, my glacier in the sun.
So I just happened to have this vocal file on my desktop and pulled it in, and I chopped it up in the Logic sampler, assigned a slice of the sample to each of the keys, and then performed kind of the hook of that line. Watch away, my glacier in the sun. Watch away, my glacier in the sun. Watch away, my glacier in the sun. But then it wasn't quite right for me, so I put it through this really odd plugin that I have. It's called Super Trigger. It's pretty old. It's really clunky and weird. It basically just glitches out whatever audio signal you send randomly. So you have to bounce it immediately, and you don't know what you're gonna get when you bounce it. It sounds different every time. So I bounced it, and then I took the parts I liked and moved them around until I came out with the glitched out version of the vocal that you hear. And then I just made that into the bridge at the intro too. That's where I introduce some chord progression to the whole thing. So I created this descending melodic line. I needed those synths to perform a function of creating movement and tension at the same time. It was going over the top of a drone, so there was some dissonant harmony that was happening. I made those synths in this stock plugin in Logic called Retro Synth. It was just a simple triangle waveform with a little bit of pitch modulation and some saturation. that drone, as it played against the descending notes, created some dissonance that eventually resolved into harmony. And that achieved a tension and movement. Then after, I got the bridge going and that introduced a new vibe to the song, then I went back in and added the other harmonic elements that you hear. There's that synth stab sample that happens on the downbeat.
Yeah, when I first heard this, the first thing that came to mind was Dr. Dre, The Watcher, Crunk 2001.
Yeah, I think that influence was coming through for sure. I made the track first for this cipher I was doing for Treehouse. Uploaded it to SoundCloud and everything, and it was its own thing. But then when it came time to make my record, I wanted to put it on the LP, so I wanted to go back into it specifically to add some organic elements to kind of loosen the feel a little bit. The night I was working on this track, I had that darbuka right next to me in the studio, and that was just the first thing I picked up. I didn't play it traditionally. I just grabbed a drumstick and hit the sides, the copper sides. I ran it through an auto filter. I put a little distortion on it. I added some room reverb. I didn't want it to be a recognizable sound. So I needed a little bit of chaos, a little bit of unpredictability in some sounds. And I did all that because it just seemed a little thin, gave more body to the sound. The glockenspiel was another one of those instruments that was sitting in the studio at the time that I was working on the track, so I just went for it because it was there, really. So I just picked it up and made a little pattern that was working for it. I needed those organic elements, an instrument being played in a room with a microphone on the track to make me feel satisfied with it. I processed it through a ring modulator to make it a little more unrecognizable. So that's one of the things I love about electronic music is you can't really picture where a lot of these sounds are coming from. So, you're coming into this music more blind without preconceived ideas of what you're hearing. So it becomes more about the sound than it is about somebody performing the sound.
I really like this track, man. I think it's a good representation of your whole entire style because a lot of your music has a lot of world samples. You mentioned earlier that you went to CalArt to study world music for a short stint. Those influences kind of come from that time?
Probably, but also probably because growing up, my dad exposed me to a lot of different music. And, a lot of that was music from all over the world. But yeah, I think a good portion of my musical education was in things like West African polyrhythm, East Indian melody. So it's pretty hard for those influences not to be strong when that was a pretty formative part of your musical education.
Huh.
So
that's dope. Sounds like you had a very eclectic musical upbringing.
Yeah, no doubt.
That definitely helps out. And I know you have a son, right?
Yeah, I'm a father to a 3-year-old right now.
I'm always curious because the thing I look forward to the most being a father in the future is just playing all of my favorite music, playing some Wu-Tang or Philip Glass and the headphones on the stomach or something, like just playing, like introducing the child into my favorite music. What type of music do you play your son? Because I know there's studies that if you play classical music, that helps with like cognitive growth. Did you follow that, or what'd you play him?
I played him some classical music when he was really little. I also played him a lot of Bansuri flute music that really seemed to resonate with him, and it calmed him down a lot when he was having a hard time. We also played a lot of bass music for him too, instrumental trap music, that sort of thing. He really loved that.
Well, who wouldn't?
As he's gotten a little older, he's very particular about what he wants to hear when he wants to hear it. So it's become a little bit more difficult.
So you're just like sometimes not in the mood to hear Little John?
Yeah, or sometimes not in the mood to hear anything. Anytime I pick up the guitar, he wants to play it. He wants to tell me how to play it. Or anytime, he sees my computer, he's like, Dad, let's make beats. And
he says, Dad, let's make beats?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll bring up some drum patches or something and he'll bang it out. And then if I try and help him in any way, he's like, no, let me show you how to do this. No, I got this. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is he gonna be featured on any of your new music?
Yeah.
Wasn't Alicia Keys and Swiss Beats son on the Kendrick Lamar album?
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Did that happen? Oh,
apparently he did. He banged out some drums.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I think I heard about that. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, that kid is really talented.
How do you find time to make music while having a child? Because I know the second thing I think about when I think about having a child is the amount of time that's going to be taken away. How do you find that creative space?
Well, that's the challenge, but I do it anyway because I have to, because making music is something I can't shake. It's a huge part of me. But I just have to take these little moments when I can find them, and it's usually late at night, so I don't get much sleep anymore. Yeah, it's just really carving out these little moments, and the trick is to use that time effectively, which is kind of helpful in certain ways. Limitations are always helpful for an artist.
Right.
I mean, they're difficult, but it can be helpful. Like, I only have so much time, I have to make it count.
Well, it's cool that you're able to make time, and it's inspiring. I want to pivot back. I want to ask you about your style, because you have a very bass-heavy, very electronic. You do incorporate those world elements that we just discussed. How would you, in your own words, describe your style?
Probably describe my style as being ancient and futuristic at the same time. It's a mix of being organic and synthetic. I like to mash up different textures.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because in Glaciers and Thunder, I got a very ancient metaphysical vibe from just the way you utilize the organic elements. Like, the first thing I kind of pictured when I heard this track was aliens dancing around a campfire. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you're going for?
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Like ancient aliens type stuff?
Yeah.
I won't get into it, but, I just, because it has like the darbukas used in a weird way. It kind of makes it sound like a monkey. The vocal sounds dark.
Well, there's a very tribal feel to the beat, pretty primal. And that vocal sample that I used, the way I treated it, it almost makes it sound like kind of monks or something chanting.
I noticed you're a big sampler. Are these samples typically taken off of vinyl? Or where do you sample from?
I sample from all over the place. Right now I'm sampling a lot from cassettes, sample from recordings I've made of other people over the years. I have a big library of samples from, myself. I have a library of stuff I've sampled from the CalArts record library, where I'd go in and plug my mini disc into their output of their mixer and just sample away at their records. But
that's such a luxury.
I don't think they know about that yet. Because I did it mostly after I already left the school. I sample a lot of field recordings too, where I'll go out and record sounds that I hear. I was playing a music festival in Costa Rica a couple years ago, and I noticed early in the morning the next day, all the dogs in the neighborhood were barking, and it was almost like they were emulating the sounds they were hearing all night before. So I grabbed my iPhone and I just recorded it real quick, and I ended up coming home and using it on one of my tracks, Pacific Reflection with Ray Black.
Yeah, that came out really cool. Like, what made you think of using dogs?
Well, I mean, those dogs, it sounded like they were emulating the synths they were hearing all night, just the rhythm they were doing. It was kind of like a call and response. And that's one of the things I love about making electronic music is any sound in the world is game.
Essentially.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
And when should we expect that new project to come out?
Early summer. Probably early June is what I'm shooting for.
Well, I look forward to that, and I think it's time to listen to Glaciers and Thunder in its entirety now. So why don't you tell everybody where we can find your music at?
You can find me at pretty much anywhere you stream music. SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, or, I still got some physical cassettes left if you want to hit me up on Bandcamp. Yeah.
I want to thank Gnome Beats once again for coming on today's show and giving us a glimpse of the man behind the music. I also want to thank you, the listener, for spending your time with us. You could have been anywhere else in this world, but you're here with us, and I appreciate that. If you enjoyed today's episode or found value in it, please feel free to share it with a friend or perhaps give us a positive rating on iTunes. That would really help us out. That would also help other people discover the show as well, and we'd really appreciate it. Let the Beat Build can be found on all podcast streaming platforms. I'm your host, Marcelino Villalpando. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, peace.